minutes of the previous meeting. I believe we only have one meeting to approve this time. I'll kick things off by making a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the previous meeting without correction or exception. And I have a second.
I'll second it.
Time for discussion. Anyone have questions or discussion on the minutes? Discussion? Questions? Not? We'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Treasurer's report. We
Mr.
don't have
Chairman,
a treasurer yet.
what about the zone meeting a month ago?
I'm sorry?
The call-in meeting a month ago.
Oh.
Did that be noted?
That's these minutes, isn't it? I think so, yeah.
It is?
Yeah.
Yeah, by conference call.
We had postponed the monthly meeting last month 1 week forward, so the 31st was our regular
Okay.
meeting.
Good catch, though. You never know what I'm going to miss. Hello, Jill.
I forgot my mask, so I'll sit way back here.
You're the last person who should forget your mask. Should I get you a scarf or something? I have scarves.
I'm not normally used to having to fill a drink and pick up a lawn chair to go to a meeting. So I forgot my mask.
Can I get you a scarf?
I don't care.
I don't.
I don't think y'all are going to infect me, and I'm not going to infect you. So.
Well, it might be so. I'm a little OCD, so everybody in healthcare is.
And if you can stand the sun, it's a good disinfectant.
Yeah.
What happened to your finger?
It ran into a flying pulley wheel.
It ran into what?
A pulley wheel? A spinning one.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
Was your question satisfactory? Taken care of. All right.
Okay. All right. You made a motion.
Yeah.
We voted on the minutes.
I made a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
Yeah.
Okay, we're up to the treasurer's report.
Yeah.
You just made a motion to approve it.
And did we get a second?
Alan made
We
the
never got
motion.
the second. Vote on it or discuss it.
All right.
There isn't much discussion on the treasurer's report. I didn't even see it this time.
I got it.
Well, then there isn't any discussion.
No discussion.
All in favor of accepting it as presented?
Let me know.
Opposed? Motion carries. It's time for Jean and the medical staff report, if you're ready.
I am, because Tanya handed me the file, which I have reviewed before. So today we have two credentialing recommendations. One is for a pulmonologist, Dr. Robert L. Sork, who does sleep medicine consulting for us. And this is a reappointment with all his requested privileges, and these have all been reviewed by me and the medical staff and approved.
Can you spell his last name, please?
Sure, Sork. S-O-U-R-K as in Katie.
Thank you.
I don't know how you ordinarily, do you want to vote on this one first, or should I present
Wait a
this one?
minute, no, how many do you have?
2,
And we'll go together.
okay? The next, this is another reappointment for all requested privileges, and this is for one of our radiology consultants. It's a Dr. Arnold Cabrera, and that's C-A-B as in boy, R-E-R-A. And again, reviewed by me and the medical staff, and there are no issues with these re-credentialing requests for reappointments.
Pass them to,
Very fine, thank you.
pass them that way.
Do we have to make a payment to them for like a retainer to have a consultant? So you got to pay them so much a
I don't think so.
a month or a year?
I don't think so. I think they do their own billing.
So they, based on services, so if you use them as a service, then they bill it. That's the only time you don't have to pay like a retainer.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Tanya, do you know? Am I?
No, we don't. We already paid.
Okay. Thank you.
Are these specialists generally referrals out of the clinic?
The radiologist would be somebody who's reading our films for us when we take them, because we don't have a radiologist on site.
Last paper.
And the CHEMAs, the physicians, and I believe the mid-levels do have an ability to read the images, but they would always go to the consulting radiologist for a radiologist report.
What about this? I think you mentioned one of the practitioners is sleep medicine specialist?
Yes, the other one is sleep medicine, and I would imagine that one is we would be, well, what would we be doing with him?
We do sleep studies, and we just pay on a per sleep study, and that's all we pay on that.
Does he come to our hospital to do the sleep studies?
Somebody does, like,
So that must be him.
Yeah, I had it done here, and
Oh, okay. I didn't know
some
that.
technician came at least to operate the test. And I don't know if it was the doctor.
now maybe
Yeah.
the doctor probably has to read it.
Yeah.
When it's all
Yeah,
said and
I
done.
don't know who. I don't know if it was the doctor or what, but I had it done right here.
Okay, okay. So,
Yeah.
does that answer your questions adequately? Is
Yeah.
that okay?
Does the hospital now have an in-house system for proactively keeping up with license renewals for the providers?
Actually, very good question, because some of these have some license things that are coming up here in the next 3 to 12 months, something like that. And I asked that very same question, and Sandra King in our medical records or health information management department does keep an entire, tracking of it in some kind of a spreadsheet or something, and she makes sure that we get the renewals appropriately. So yes, someone in-house is tracking that, David. Good question. Because some of them are coming up pretty soon. But that's just how they handle those things, I guess, in the credentialing world. I've got owls and cardinals and blue jays. The birds here are just fabulous.
You live in the land of opportunity.
It's lovely.
There's your squirrel.
There's a rabbit.
I'll see a few of them, and one up there right now.
On the radiologist, I see one of the insurance records shows an expiration of January 2020, or did they get new?
I can double check, but I think Sandy tracks that as well.
Okay.
That was Cabrera again?
Uh,
Oh, no, I'll just ask. How did
Yeah,
it go?
yeah.
Check for.
the radiologist.
I would, since I asked about the licensing, my guess is she's tracking all of those key things, but I will double check. Besides the fact that the physician is nuts if they don't renew their practice. They probably ought not to be practicing medicine if they just keep that going.
Well, you want to look at this? That's this one.
Oh, okay.
I'm old and probably wouldn't understand it.
You need name?
Got him.
Back to you.
Nope, need to make a motion. I'll make a motion that we
Yeah.
approve Robert L. SOUK sleep study and Arnold Cabrera radiology with consulting privileges for Lincoln County Hospital.
Second to that motion? Motion has been made and seconded to accept
Oh,
the
who seconded it? I missed it. You did, Cody? Okay.
recommendations of our Dr. Stork and Dr. Kendar to radiology and pulmonary consulting. All in favor say discussion? No discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. No opposition, no discussion. Motion carried. Now we're back to you.
Dang it. All right, the administrator's report. I think, well, I'll give you the thumbnail sketch of what's happening at the hospital, and then we'll spend most of our time on the budget and more detail on the financials here. And we have a presentation for you, fairly informal, of course, in the garage, but presentation nonetheless. First of all, I am feeling really good about our cash situation, which is really ironic. Randy was saying it the other day, how ironic it is that the pandemic is helping us. But I think we were already decreasing our costs. Jill's not going to quote me on all of this, I hope. We were already decreasing our costs. We already had low patient volumes. So we were kind of ahead of the other facilities that are now, they can't do their elective surgeries. They're laying off staff. And so we were kind of already there at a low point. And so, and we were coming back up on our own, by reducing costs and increasing our marketing. Now, what we have seen is that our inpatient beds have kind of been running at 4 beds filled a day for most of the month of April. And we actually had as many as 7 yesterday and 6 today. So, it's always a moving target. But I can't tell, I'm very pleased at what Dr. Chima and the mid-levels are accomplishing on the hospital side. We also, of course, had a resignation in the chief nursing officer position. And Jackie Pounds, who's the longtime staff nurse, has decided to step up into the interim, chief nursing officer role, and she's doing a great job. And I'll probably be looking at filling that permanently. And I think she's just got so much potential, and she has a lot of experience in a lot of different settings. And so she really fits our setting well. I think she's worked in our hospital, 8 or 10 years or something?
Oh, at least.
Yeah. So very down to earth, feet on the ground, centered, excellent nurse, knows what she's doing, ready to take that next step. So that's the inpatient side. The ER has been running really about the same. We are getting, it was a bit of an adrenaline kick, you know, when we get a potential COVID patient, a person under investigation, and we're having to do testing and that kind of a thing. But the staff has handled everything very, very well. And because the danger we have as a staff is that if somebody gets exposed and has to be quarantined or gets sick, we've exposed it's hard to keep the hospital open. You know, we've just been having discussions about what if we had to quarantine Dr. Chima, for instance. Not such a great idea. So anyway, and it's such a small facility, we've had good luck. The clinic, we wanted at the beginning of the pandemic to keep patients at home as much as possible. And, we were doing telemedicine and Skype and FaceTime. And Dr. Yasmin Chima really set that all up. She had some help from Tanya and Devin from the IT people, but she really made that happen. And I think that was really good at first. And so everybody, their regular visits, people are tending not to come in for their regular visits. I suppose they're a little bit afraid. We've sort of encouraged people to, you know, stay away. And now we need to start bringing them back. And because our clinic numbers are pretty much in the ditch, I would say. If we see 2 or 3 patients a day, that's a big day. And of course, that's not enough to keep the place going at all. And you will see some of that reflected in the budget figures is how quickly can we come out of that. And then I was not happy with our patient volumes in the clinic when I came here before the pandemic. So how far can we go with that? I don't know. And we're just, you know, starting to get rolling back towards that. And we'll be setting up separate COVID areas, both in the hospital as well as in the clinic, where someone who is COVID or suspected COVID will be taken care of in a sealed area. And then the clean patients will be in another area, in a clinic or the hospital. And so we're working on that. I would say, well, we're ready to go on the hospital side, and the clinic side, we're very close as well. So, and so the clinic volume is lower, and but I think the good part of that story is it's a new day, and I've been working hard on a new website and on Facebook to get out there more on social media. I think you've seen more from the hospital and the local paper, and that's all on purpose. It's our new day. And then I think the other major part of this picture is that the pandemic has helped us a lot.
You will now be placed into the conference.
Maybe Tanya, you could, would you mind showing them the grant report that you have and talking about that? We have about Jill's here. Got it here. We have about $1.3 million in cash right now. Now, the one part of it we're going to have to pay back, the $1 million piece of it. That's the Medicare. We got an advance payment from Medicare for the next, is it 6 months, Tanya? Or 4?
We got an accelerated payment for 6 months. And then we have to start payment back in every 30 days.
Got it. So that's a payback thing. So we're trying to be very careful. And then we have about $300,000 worth that if we use it for pandemic, we won't have to pay it back. Actually, maybe about $400 now all told, with the federal CARES and the state $100,000.
Yeah, the $100,000 from the state, we don't have to worry about paying that back. There's no ties to anything on that.
Yeah. Now that cash we haven't acted. Did we receive that yet today?
No, it was supposed to have been to us today, but we've not yet seen it.
And then the big news today, Tanya has just done a fabulous job in working with our bank on the Small Business Association PPP loans, basically for payroll. And we have that submitted, and we just heard today, and that means about $700,000?
Close to, $670,000.
Yes. And the basic purpose of that is to help employers stay open and retain the number of employees that they have. And so, assuming we do that, which we should be able to, we will not have to pay that money back either. So it's ironic how we have benefited from this, but it just gives us that little bit. It takes the edge off so that we can do a little bit more marketing and all those kinds of things. And I'm going to let Tanya go through the different COVID grant funding, because there are a number of things that are in process here. And I guess I would call out Tanya has done a great job, and David has also been very, very helpful in some of these things. But I'll let you just go through that, Tanya. Is that okay?
Yeah. The first one on here is the accelerated payment that Jean just spoke about, and it is a loan. They did discuss in the huddle today with KJ that there's hope that maybe in the future they will forgive part of that, but that's just a hope, and that's a future bill, and who knows with that. But after 120 days, Medicare will start, when we bill something to Medicare, they won't pay us that money because we've already gotten the money. So we'll keep getting zero payments up until that amount of money is paid back.
But then at that time, that cash drops up.
That's correct.
And that's probably 60% of our cash, so we've got to manage towards that,
Right.
if you will.
Right. The full amount is owed back to CMS at the end of 245 days. We also looked at the ASPR grant. It required a 5-year contract for $3,000. But there was a lot of lengthy work involved in trying to obtain that, and so we ended up declining that.
That one was
Because it was a 5-year contract for only $3,000.
What is ASPR? Do you remember? It was something through KJ, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was with KJ, and it had something to do with.
It was a grant they got. They only got about $700,000 to begin with, and they got it from somewhere, wherever it was from. And then KHA doled it out kind of by hospital size, and ours turned into $3,000. So we said, keep it. There was a 5-year, it was just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then the county commissioners yesterday was very gracious and signed our paperwork for the payroll protection program. We did qualify. We just got notification from Mitch right before this board meeting, and a copy of the email was attached.
This one took a lot of time.
Yeah. And so, anyway, we applied yesterday. It's $678,000. That money, they expect it to go out pretty quickly, so we thought we better jump on it rather quickly, or we would completely lose out.
Yep.
You have to retain the same number of employees. That's the whole gist of it.
Oh, can I add something
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
how timely Tanya was on the Medicare accelerated payment? There's some hospitals that kind of didn't want to do that, and now the money may no longer be there. And, you can kind of see that because we're going to have to manage the cash drop down the road probably to some degree, unless our marketing goes really well. But on the other hand, it was sort of a no-brainer for us because we needed cash. So that was great that Tanya got that and did that so quickly. Thank you, Tanya.
Sure. On the payroll protection program, the due date of the loan is 2 years if we would have to pay it back. We're hoping that we don't. It's kind of a mixed bag. We're not for sure that we qualify, even though we were approved. The Attorney General is looking at that.
The U.S. Attorney General.
Yeah, the U.S. Attorney General, and it's going to have to make a decision on whether or not non-501c3 hospitals can qualify at this time. So, but we have it, and we're just going to manage that money really carefully. And according to Mitch's email, we should have that money in our bank in about 10 days. So
Just amazing.
I did pull something off the web. The federal, I believe this came from SBA. They issued federal guidance 4 days ago, And it says, according to the guidance, a hospital that is otherwise eligible to receive a PPP loan as a business concern or nonprofit organization as described by 501c3 of the IRC of 1986 and exempt from taxation under Section 501A of the Code shall not be rendered ineligible for a PPP loan due to ownership by a state or local government if the hospital receives less than 50% of its funding from the state or local government sources exclusive of Medicaid. So as far as this federal guidance, 4 days ago, it sounds like we have a good chance of qualifying.
It's just that 501c3 piece of the puzzle that's...
You can look at the, like what's in Brenn's there. Definitely Senator Moran's office, it was the intention to have hospitals, county-owned hospitals like ours get this, but the wording, you can argue that a couple different ways, so that's what's being clarified, but Tanya's on it, she's got it.
Good.
I also contacted Representative Marshall's office, and he was aware of the deal with being a county-owned hospital, so he was going to check into that for us too. So.
Okay. I just believe it because the lady out in the Manhattan office for Senator Moran was like, "Here's your language." I mean, she just gave me exactly what you read off, and here's the deal, and it's on page 6, and here you go. And she was just, I think, assumed that we qualified. Now, maybe she didn't know we weren't 501c3 either, but anyway, that it was their intention to cover places like ours.
And I did check with DK. He thought that we would qualify. It was SBA and KJ that are kind of like maybe not. But anyway, we were approved. So the SHIP grant funding, we're waiting on details on that. There's probably going to be some additional funding available there.
How much, do they talk about how much or how much do we usually get?
They
Usually isn't all that much, right?
Not normally, but with this CARES Act, they're looking at some more funding, but they have no details at this point. The CARES Act Provider Relief Fund, we received payment on 4/17 for $313,594. But we do have to use that money for prevention, to prepare for and respond to coronavirus, for health care related expense or lost revenues that are attributed to coronavirus. We have to meet all the guidelines there, or we could possibly have to pay some money back, but we're going to try to make it work for us.
It will work. It came to me the other day that even just our lost revenues in the clinic probably would. We didn't crank the numbers, but that's got to be a big number.
Yeah.
So there's
and
that.
It's too early to tell right now on the revenue on the clinic. So the State of Kansas COVID-19 grant, as a critical access hospital, will receive $100,000. That payment was supposed to have been to us on Friday, but they're checking into where it's at because it could be a check versus an electronic payment. So it could be still funneling around through the mail. I'm sorry. There's no specific requirements tied to this study, so we don't have to pay that amount back.
We could throw a party. We could go to Hawaii. What do you think? Okay, I laugh. We're supposed to laugh now.
The American Hospital Association.
Oh, can I ask a question? On the CARES Act, and this has confused me, there's potentially more money going to be coming out of this thing, right?
But there's no details on how much at this point.
And do we understand how they came up with $300,000 for us? I think it's been very unclear.
It's based on our size.
Oh, okay, somehow.
So some facilities have received a lot more.
Right.
It was based on our size.
Okay.
On the American Hospital Association FEMA grant, we don't qualify for that. Telehealth grant funding, there's a lot of loopholes involved, probably with not a lot of return, but we're still reviewing that.
Oh, if I can add there, and this is separate from the grant funding for telehealth, but we were doing the right thing from a public health perspective and getting on Skype and on phones and all of that, and all of these payers get a lot of great press. Oh, we're paying for telehealth now. Well, Tanya and her staff, Cora and Sandy, have been on webinars. They've got the claims all ready to go. The Chimas have been great at documenting and the coding and all of that. And let's not count, you get paid a fair amount less for a telehealth visit than you do for a clinic visit, just because you're not able to do the physical assessment and stuff, I guess. Anyway, if we see any of that money, it will shock me. It might be 2 or 3 years down the road. I mean, you can't plan on it. We did it because it was the right thing to do for the public health. And they have worked on this, and the payers, we were on these webinars and stuff. I wasn't personally telling you and stuff. And have it all ready to go, but the payers said, oh, don't send them in yet. We're not ready to accept them yet. And then you sent some to...
Medicare for the telephone-only visits, and we got denials on those. So we sent...
Oh, they're getting big PR, and I don't think... There's big hope that they're going to start paying for telehealth, and I just don't think they will myself. So anyway, we're doing the right, that's a community service for the right thing for the public health. And we contributed a lot to that. You know, there's some counties and facilities that weren't on top of that, like LaDonna and Dr. Chima were. So we'll have to count that in our community service maybe. If we ever get paid, I'll be shocked. But this grant funding was something else. I'll let you go. Sorry.
That's okay. The Post Rock Community Foundation's COVID-19 grant, it's a little different than their normal Post Rock Community Foundation grant. We're in the works of coming up with an application for that. The Web Fund grant, also we're working on applying for around $10,000 there. The CARES Act targeted funding, we've submitted all the necessary paperwork, but this is for hospitals that have been particularly impacted by COVID-19 outbreak. We've not had any cases ourselves, so it's unlikely that we're going to see any funding here, but we did everything we needed to, just in case. CARES Act for rural providers. Health and Human Services is allocating $10 billion to rural hospitals and rural health clinics. As of the week of April 27th, on the basis of operating expenses using a methodology that distributes payment proportionally to each facility and clinic. So we should see some funding there as well, but we don't know at this point how much that's going to be. And then there's a CARES Act for treatment of uninsured. And there again, you would actually have to have a COVID-19 patient, and they would have to be uninsured for us to get any funding there. And again,
so we haven't even had patients, so yeah.
We probably won't get any funding there either. And then there's just some attachments that I attached showing some of the funding that they've got.
Is SHIP the state Medicaid umbrella? The SHIP?
No, I'm trying to think what that stands for. But it doesn't have anything to do with Medicaid. It's just a separate grant that we typically apply for and get. And then this is just another piece that they're adding on to it.
And on these attachments, correct me if I'm wrong, Tanya, but the one letter from Rowena Regier is talking about the $100,000 that we got. And then the second attachment, the current report from KHA, that's the same
one.
Okay,
yes.
Just to be clear.
Yep.
And then the last attachment you have is from, is this our banker?
It is.
Uh-huh. So that's for the PPP.
When will you go on that PPP, $600,000 with the forgivable or not?
That would be up to the Attorney General.
So who knows when?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
We've been approved for the funding. It's just a matter of whether or not we may have to pay back
Some of them are part of all
Yeah,
or whatever.
yeah.
Okay.
And we'll report regularly on these things,
Yeah,
right?
and
So-
even getting back to that accelerated payment, there is some talk that we may not have to pay back all of that, but that's coming in another bill. So,
That would be great.
yeah,
But
time will tell.
So, are there questions about this? Obviously, this has taken a lot of our time, and it's been mostly Tanya, with some support from me and Steve Ladd and Sandy King and Cora, that group. So, but Tanya has been spending a lot of time on this, and she's our finance department. So just to let, but it's been it's probably return on investment's probably as high as it's ever been, eh?
Yeah.
Well, it's good you applied early for all this stuff, because I've heard that the ones who applied early got some, but now some of them were left out, and then they're complaining, and then they want Congress to pass more.
Right.
Just like some of these small businesses didn't get the first round of payments.
Right.
And who knows, where that'll be. So it's good that you did this early.
Yeah, and that PPP that we qualified for, that just opened up yesterday at 2:30.
Yeah.
And then their site was down that the bank has to go in and put the data into.
She's
Even
good
at
on it. It's
even
fine.
at 2:00, the site was still down. So the bank was on it too. So,
Yeah, well, very good.
yeah.
So I'm very thankful for that. Are there more questions or other things you want to talk about regarding this grant thing that we're going for on different things and different funding?
Not for me.
Okay.
And since we're talking money, yesterday at our commissioner meeting, we were discussing, obviously this COVID issue. One thing, of course, gas and diesel are way down, price of oil is way down. Because of that, the big pipeline, one of the biggest ones we have up here by Bob, we're worried. They pay like $1.8 million a year to the county in taxes. About $900,000 for each payment. And then coming up in May, and there's some concern they may not pay or pay part of it because I don't think they're pumping gas right now because it's nowhere to go. I think it's stopped. So we've been told there may be an issue there. So the county may be losing some tax money coming in. So that could affect all of us on different things. So it's good that the hospital got this extra funding because I know the normal plan was to give the second half of the payment, the $500,000. Well, now we'll see where we're at. Financially, the county, we may have to delay that to you guys.
Okay.
Especially now if you have funds.
Well, we have cash.
Yeah, if you're not, financially in trouble. We'll have to see. I don't know. I don't want to make statements here. I'm just saying there's this concern with the pipelines, and they pay us a lot of money. So that's just an issue coming up for the whole county, and we're thinking we may have tightened the belt other places within the county. That's all I have.
Well, I don't want to speak for, you should speak, but I guess, you have been supportive of us as a hospital, and I guess, I would like to be supportive if they feel like they need to watch their, tighten their purse strings.
Well, hopefully if things, we don't know, they may pay like normal. Maybe property tax will come in like normal because Lincoln County really hasn't been affected. Most of the people in Lincoln County are essential workers where we're still going on about our business almost. There are some laid off and some businesses shut down, but not too many. So hopefully our property tax situation won't be too bad. If that's the case, we'll probably go on with payments like we would have normally, but this is a concern with this pipeline. So we'll deal with that. After May 11th, when all the property tax should be coming in, we'll know more.
Okay. Thank you, and can I go on? I think we're moving to budget.
Still have the floor.
Thank you. Tanya and I have spent a fair amount of time with this budget, and I know there's a lot of questions. I had questions about how the budget's put together and that kind of a thing, and I had the opportunity of spending 2 and 3 hours with Tanya going through all the details, and we can do whatever the board feels they want. And just recognize, Tanya's maybe not quite so used to this, but I think it's basically the right thing to do. But let me give you the thumbnail sketch on this budget. So, revenue. How do we know what's going to happen after COVID? We have no idea. Let's say people get sick in this as we open up, and all of a sudden they're all going to Salina and Hayes and Wichita for care and stuff, and we still have no clinic patients and we don't have inpatients, and it's just impossible to predict. So the exercise that I've already put Tanya through is kind of the best case scenario, worst case scenario, and what you have presented here is kind of our middle guess estimate. And I would say, despite the detail issues in here that we'll get into, Tanya does know the details, but has not had to present them to anybody in years, decades. And the other piece is really the big question mark is, can we get that revenue growing? Because we have the expenses managed to where they need to be for the most part. I mean, I'm working on this, that, and the other thing yet, but we're restructuring the mid-levels. That will have an impact in June, July. And what else big thing did I do? I did more than that. The charge master was big. And I can't even remember, it was in whatever board report we had before, that on things where we've reduced expenses. And I would suggest that we are about as reduced our expenses as much as we can and keep the place running in a halfway decent manner. So it's all about revenue and growing the CHEMA clinic practice. And then the follow through with the ancillary testing and inpatient and swing beds after that. So, I also will say in this picture that this nursing home here, I guess there's a new administrator, I have to meet her yet, but they've done a great job too. I mean, back in Iowa, they're killing people in a big Medicaid nursing home near where I live. And I mean, they're just doing terrible work on infection control. And 80 staff and residents and 4 or 5 or 6 deaths in one nursing home. So Lincoln County has had the good fortune of being served really well by their healthcare professionals because that nursing home is doing great as well. And Dr. CHEMA is the primary physician for most of the residents out there now. And he did that himself way before I showed up. And somebody asked me if he was billing for those, and Tanya said the answer is yes. So I'm going to, I appreciate that we don't have as much detail as maybe one could in a hospital budget. On the other hand, this is the work process that, this is our finance department here. And this is the process that she came to with the leadership that she's had until Jean shows up. So I didn't make her redo all of this like I'm used to seeing it. And we had a discussion, and she was able to explain things to me, and we can do the same here. But I think that we just have to kind of walk through this carefully, and what are we using our time for, and what it is that we present to the county. And we just need to have kind of the reasonable person approach. And so are there questions about generally what we did? And revenue is the big, who knows what we're going to be able to do. So with that, I would hand it over to Tanya for presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, on the budget, we combined the Lincoln and the Sylvan clinics into one. We ended up with a projected loss at the clinic of $600,286. I will say that we started out with a better picture.
I think people are still looking for the right. I'm still looking for the right page. Can you hang on here a little bit? Where are you?
Yep, right there.
Is it
what Jim has?
What Jim has. Oh, okay. Oh, got it. It's kind of in back, right? Yes. Okay. It's the 6th page from the back, 7th page from the back is where she's starting. Thank you.
We did start out with a, pardon? Oh, okay. Sorry. We started out with less of a loss, but then
the first round of budget.
The first round. The COVID-19 thing came about, and that is completely up in the air because we really, at this point, don't have any historical data to base it on. We've only had the month of month of April, a little bit in March, maybe a half a month. So we did our best to come up with what we were projecting for revenue there.
I believe and correct me if I'm wrong, we kind of assumed almost zero clinic revenue for, was it 4 months?
Yeah, I think we reduced it by $45,000 per month for 4 months. So we reduced it by $180,000 is what we ended up doing.
Okay.
Now, on the hospital side, we projected a profit of $120,563. So I'm just going to walk through a little bit of the detail, keeping in mind that with the COVID-19 and all the changes that are taking place every day, it's very difficult to try to predict what tomorrow's going to bring. So, okay, on the Lincoln Medical Clinic for the professional fees for Rural Health Clinic, we increased that by 5%, and that was based on the charge master review. So our revenue would be increased because of that. And then we combined the Lincoln and Sylvan Medical Clinic with that being closed. We're assuming that all the revenue from the Sylvan Clinic is going to come over to the Lincoln Medical Clinic. And then we reduced it by $180,000 because of the COVID-19. On the deductions from income at $249,000, that was an increase of 5% from the charge master review, plus the Sylvan Clinic combining had a cost report savings of $7,000. So on the cost report, when you combine those two, we would have ended up saving $7,000. Then on the salaries and wages, we reduced it by one full-time equivalent mid-level, which was $170,000 is what we ended up doing on that. And then we had a lot of staffing changes over there that ended up going to the hospital side. We had a clinic manager that was there for part of the year. We had a couple nurses that moved. We had a nurse that quit and moved on, and we did not replace him. Dr. Dragoni was in there for part of the year. So when you do that and you combine the salaries from the Sylvan Clinic, that's where that $732,000 came from. Then the employee benefits, we typically figure that at 25% of salary. And so that's just basically 25% of what the salary figure is. On the professional fees, we added 3% inflation, plus we had to cover 21 weeks of vacation at $75 an hour. So that bumped it up to about $40,951. On the supplies, the purchase services, both of those we added 3% inflation. On the depreciation, since we won't have a Sylvan Clinic financial anymore, all of that depreciation then came over the Lincoln financial. On the telephone, 3% inflation. We have canceled over at the Sylvan Clinic all the cable, telephone, and internet. So that right there is a savings every month. Maintenance, 3% inflation based on historical data. Our insurance decreased slightly because of our new insurance company. Travel and education, we're assuming will stay about the same because most of that is contracted by their contracts for the mid-levels and the physicians, so that should stay historically about the same. In the other operating expenses, this consists of personnel, recruiting, and advertising. Added about 3% inflation there as well, which brought us to the $600,000 loss. Now keep in mind that the Sylvan Clinic, Lincoln Clinic, we had an annualized loss of $865,000, and at the Sylvan Clinic, we would have had $103,000. So if you add those two together, we still have a savings projected at budget level. And then there's Sylvan Medical Clinic, there's not much to discuss there. And then we go to the Lincoln County Hospital. Now on the revenues there, when we did the charge master review, that would have increased our revenue substantially because of that. However, because of the COVID-19 and the uncertainties there, we also decreased it 5%, which netted out to not making any changes at all. So instead of increasing it or reducing it, we just left it level. The deductions from revenue, 3% increase there, except for the provision for uncollectible accounts. I am guessing because we're going to have more people that are unemployed, their finances are not going to be in the best of shape, our bad debt will increase substantially there. So whether that is sufficient, I'm not certain, but we're hoping that that would be the case. On other operating revenue, that consists of things such as meal sales, employee, guest, and Meals on Wheels and jail. So that's all of our meal sales. The 340B program revenue is included in there, and grants. So the funding that we got from our grants, we added in the $313,594 from the Health and Human Services grant. We're hoping to get that $28,000 from the Post Rock Foundation, $10,000 from the Web Fund, and $100,000 we know we're going to get from the state. Hopefully that amount will increase substantially. There's going to be more than likely more funding. So that figure hopefully will be quite a bit more than what that even is stating there, but it's too uncertain to guess on that. On the operating expenses, on the salaries, there again we had some staffing changes, and so what we did was add in some of those nurses that had come over from the clinic. We added some additional expense for a new lab person that we're hoping to recruit. Added potentially a 3% increase in salaries, and then took off 2,080 hours for ER provider coverage by the clinic. So instead of having to pay during the daytime hours from 8 to 5, which is a full-time person, for 40 hours, we're going to, that's going to be over in the clinic side now and be covered by the new providers over there that are going to be covering both the ER and the clinic. On the employee benefits, we kept that the same, assuming that our health liability would be the same. That could be less, it could be more, just depending on what kind of insurance claims we have. On the professional fees, we added a radiology tech in there. Right now we have to contract that out. And so when we took the average of what that was running weekly and projected it out over a year, that's where that increase came from. On the supplies, that was kept the same. Purchase services eliminated contract nursing and added contract CEO. Rent expense, kept that the same. Depreciation, added the new equipment on the capital budget that we have, so the depreciation for those items in year one was added in there. The telephone, legal, maintenance, those all had a 3% inflation added to that. The dues and subscriptions took off. There's a subscription that the ER providers used to have. It's called Up to Date, they felt like they could do without that, and it was over $10,000, so we reduced that. On the insurance, decreased that slightly because of the insurance company. Travel and education, reduced education expenses. Other operating expenses, added $75,000 there. Most of that is for COVID-19, but there's also room there for we added for the advertising, additional advertising. So the things that go in that line item are things such as cable, postage, property tax, personnel recruiting, advertising, and miscellaneous expenses. On the non-operating revenue and expense line, those items are such as tax appropriation, gain and loss in sale of assets, interest expense on leases, such as lab and radiology, PDC-related expenses with the bond, board account donations, such as that $2,000 we received from the Masons, interest income on our bank accounts. So, and then I thought I would go over some of the funding that we've already received. We have received on April 13th $1,028,002 from the Accelerated Payment Program. $678,787.48 applied. We just got the notice that we will be getting that.
You're kind of repeating the grant information,
Right,
correct?
right,
Oh, okay.
right. $313,594 on 4/17 from the Department of Health and Human Services, and $100,000 we should get any day. And then I thought I would also bring you up to date on what our bank accounts look like, so you have a feel of what our cash looks like. Our operating account has a balance right now of $248,466. And with that, we were able to catch up on all of our accounts payable. So that's...
Which is a big deal.
That's
'cause
huge.
She's been balancing that.
And that's
for
a big
months.
release.
Probably almost a year, right?
About a year, yeah. So that's huge. To not have to play that juggling game. In our money market, we have a balance of $1,387,313.48. So my goal is to try to not touch much of that, since we are in 120 days looking at not getting any Medicare payments. So just want to make sure that we have the funding there. But we do have to meet our payroll on those kind of things. Also, the good news is we have, I don't know, but 6 or 7 patients in right now, and that means cash to us. So we will continue getting all of that stuff, that amount of money coming in as well, to help us meet our obligations. So, do you guys have any questions?
On the, say, I know we've been having it for years, but how much Medicare money would we get funded normally approximately on a normal year? $1 million or so, or less?
That's more than that, I think.
Is it more than that?
Yeah, it would be more than that. That $1,028,000 was based on 125% of our normal Medicare reimbursement in 6 months. So
I see. So
a little less than a couple $1 million.
about $1.5 million or something. I'm just curious about what the I know every year is different. And how many patients you have is different. I'm just curious what the approximate average is.
Yeah.
About $1.5 million, okay. Which is a big funder for our hospital, obviously.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. That's all I got. Thanks.
I have a couple questions. I think you answered this, but I'm kind of handicapped in my ability to take notes with this stupid thing on my finger. The CEO's compensation is picked up by the purchase services line item? Is that what you're
Because
saying?
it's contracted, it's not employee, yes.
And the other operating revenues line item, you said that already includes the HHS grant that we've received. Does it also include the $100K that we got from the state as well?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. The non-operating expenses, which is a revenue, it's treated as revenue because it's negative. You mentioned that includes the tax appropriation. Offhand, do you know what number you're using for our tax levy as part of that number?
I believe that you guys have voted for, was it $500,000?
Mhm.
So that's what.
And we've given you 300,000,
Right,
so
right.
another 200,000 was planned.
So that's what's budgeted.
Planned to be coming probably in June, or at least that's, but again, that's the plan, so,
And as far as syncing with the county, since our fiscal year is April 1st to March 31st, and they're operating on a calendar year, that was sort of related. Then, from my understanding, then when they appropriate $500,000 in this fiscal year for the county, we're treating that $500,000 essentially as the subsidy that we get for our fiscal year that begins April 1st through. Okay. So the decision that they make this summer for 2000 would that be your 2021 fiscal year?
I guess so. You guys' budget starts when? First of
April
June? Huh?
April 1.
April 1, so you go April 1 to end of March.
Yes.
That's your
Yes.
budget, okay. Yeah, David, I'm not sure.
So when we say our proposed budget for fiscal year ending 3/31/2021, that's the fiscal year we're in right now. So
Correct.
we're just finalizing what our projected inflows and outflows are going to be for our fiscal year that carries us through next
Right.
March.
Right.
So any decision for a tax levy for the county's next fiscal year is really a budget decision then for our 2022 budget, not the one that we're talking about today.
Correct.
Okay. There's a statutory deadline coming up on June 1st where we're supposed to provide the county commission, we only have to provide them two numbers, but if they're going to make a decision on whether to levy a tax, and their authority is from KSA 1946-06, for their 2021 fiscal year, which is our 2022 fiscal year, I think we're going to still need to get the commission a number which is the total amount we're planning to expend for 2022 and the total amount that we think we might be short, which is what that levy authority comes from. But that assumes, you see, this assumes we don't necessarily have to be asking for our subsidy for 2022. We can consider, we might want to just consider making our subsidy request, if any, for what our current fiscal year is now, if that's the budget we're working on. I mean, we don't have to make that decision now.
It's simple. We could just ask for 10.86 mils that the people approved and go for it.
The only problem is the wording of the statute is very clear and specific, and we have to provide them two numbers.
Well, maybe we'll get two new commissioners to help Randy out. And we can put it and take it out of the budget, out of the county general, and then we'll just have it that way then, okay?
Well, regardless of who's on the county commission, Mr. Serene, they have to comply with the statute.
All right, if we have a,
Go ahead.
if the people vote on a certain amount of mill levy for the hospital, they can't change it.
The referendum that the voters approved in our county gave them a mill levy authority up to a certain mill, which is 10.8. It still rests with the commission how much to tax, and then for their authority to pass muster for taxpayers who could protest their tax payments if they felt they were not compliant with their tax certification, which is published in the paper and other things, they still have to at least, in good faith, follow the statute, which requires that their decision is at least based on two numbers that the Board of Trustees provides them by June 1st each year, which is the total amount of money that we have to expend to operate, maintain, equip, and improve the hospital, and then any amount for which our predicted revenues will not cover. And then they use that number along with that 10.8 maximum, and that's where their authority comes from to decide how much, up to 10.8, and they could very well give us 10.8, because if the pipelines don't pay the county, that mill rate will go quite high, and the 10.8 maximum might not even be worth $500,000 in that kind of a scenario. But we still, I think, want to make an effort to provide the county commission two numbers by June 1st, which is a total amount that we need to expend and the total amount that we think we may need from taxpayers to fund our budget. And we still have a little over 30 days to meet that statutory deadline. And I emailed Chairman Houston that we certainly don't have to decide today. We could potentially call a special meeting between now and June 1st to figure that out.
Yeah. If I could just step back from, we all know, I think we all know the picture here, and call me a silly, business conservative, but I work towards having my hospital stand on their own. And you can maybe get me to be okay taking tax money, Randy, for capital improvements. Because it's hard to generate enough of a bottom line to, like, if we someday get to build a new clinic or something. So, don't say we're building a new clinic, because we're not gonna. So, right now. Anyway, but so, I really believe in that, and that's the way I run. You can't make me run any different. If you want somebody to throw money around, find somebody else. Okay? And I do good work, quality work. And I also try to be fair, and I'm adjusting some pay for people. We have some of the lowest paid people in the hospital business in the whole state of Kansas here. And yet I also find, and this got fixed with the mid-level restructuring, and don't put this in the paper either, so that I had some providers paid, they weren't even on the universe, in a different universe. So I got some people ground in it, working them for, not even a living wage, and some good workers too, people. And then I got these other people, let me tell you, they weren't anywhere close to earning the out of the universe thing. So this is what I find here as an administrator. And I like to take good care of people who are doing good work, and I run with the bottom line. Now, I think it is going to be highly unpredictable what happens this year because of the COVID. I've got to get those clinic patient numbers about twice as high as they were when I showed up. And we're at kind of nothing right now. Okay? And I got to deal with the fact that some of the providers, not the Chinas, think they're busy if they've got 8 or 10 patients a day. Well, let me tell you, they're not covering their salary at that rate. So, much less. So, and you guys have been very patient. I'm getting this stuff, kind of straightened out on some of these things. And sadly, if you guys had been told about some of this stuff, you probably wouldn't have allowed it to happen. This is the board education thing, what you need to have an eye on. And I will be sharing some things with you that you haven't seen before. But going back to what you want to give the county is, we probably need to talk through it as a board because it's just so wild crazy here that I've never seen anything in my 30 years of doing budgets that is unpredictable as what we're in right now. So that's all I'm saying, and I appreciate your guidance, and I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present something to the county that makes sense. And I do want to present but I don't want to waste anybody's money. It's against my religion. So, but I'm in a particular different environment. I'm supposed to be working half-time too, and then we have the pandemic. You know, it's anybody's guess at this point.
As far as the predictive guide, as the budget is presented, there's a roughly a $600,000 loss on the clinic side, but there's a $120,000 surplus on the hospital side. As far as non-cash adjustments to the income statement that you're using as a basis for your budget, I do see that we have $600,000 in depreciation expenses, which, as you know, is an income adjustment. It's not actually a cost that costs us cash. If you were paying taxes as a corporation, it's more of a taxing for, you know, for asset valuation and other things, which is good news because that's $600,000 that we effectively add to the surplus of the hospital. There's 10 in the clinic and 590 in the hospital. So we still have a $600,000 cash loss roughly on the clinic side, but we now have a $720,000 surplus on the hospital side. So our budget, as far as that is concerned, is better than balanced. I realize that we're only able to predict our revenues. However, in the non-operating revenue expense line item, which is that second from the bottom line, we have to take into account that that is assuming a $500,000 subsidy that we've already received from the hospital. So when we take a roughly $120,000 surplus, but includes $500,000 of tax allocation, the cash need, if we were talking KSA 194670C, 4607C, yes, it's $380,000 would be, for example, if this was our budget that we were presenting as a basis for next year, this budget still shows, all things being equal on the predictions, that we still need an infusion of $380,000 on a cash basis to keep those bank accounts where they are. Now I realize if we don't have to pay back the PPP loan, now we're actually on our way to rebuilding our capital cushion, because the hospital still needs working capital, given the fact that you can only, how good can you predict $7 million worth of revenue? So if the PPP turns out to be a forgivable loan, I think that we could basically meet your plan objective, which is to wean ourselves off of taxes for operating expenses and then potentially look at the voters' generosity for infrastructure, which is always, needed in our clinic, I believe is pretty old. But my main, concern today, and I think you've answered it, was to figure out on a cash basis where we are in terms of depending on the taxpayers to continue funding the hospital. So this budget, except for PPP or other grants are the magic sauce here. This budget is assuming, at least $380,000 to break even if we were to use this as our 2022 budget. Of course, that would also assume we're getting $500,000 or $600,000 in grants that you already have in that other line item. And that may be a tall order for 2022 as well. But sounds like we're in very good shape this year compared to last year. You had mentioned lastly that your other operating expenses has increased for marketing and communications. CEO Goshi mentioned the importance that we have some rebuilding to do. I think we have a great brand and a strong image, and advertising is certainly one way that we can rebuild our patron numbers in the clinic. And I wanted to know, does that other operating expenses include monies perhaps for us to do a quarterly mailed out newsletter to every household in the county?
I looked at some of that budget information that you supplied me, and probably not. I think what we were looking at that, what did we figure we were putting in about $25,000
Yeah, something
total
to that.
between the clinic and the hospital, so I'm guessing that won't be enough to do that, so we could use some. More, I mean, more is better.
The cost to do the quarterly newsletter, if it's done in-house, would be between $6,000 and $8,000 a year in terms of the printing cost and the postage. The question would be whether the hospital wants to contract out a communications person to act as a coordinator to do the collection of all the testimonials from our customers, our patients, all the press releases that go through the newspaper can be repurposed. I've heard from some folks from the hospital auxiliary, they'd love to have an outlet to start doing their own outreach. So, you have a page for the hospital auxiliary. The hospital foundation does great works. How often are you guys outreaching to everybody in the county? This quarterly newsletter could feature a page from the hospital foundation board each quarter where you're letting everybody in the county know what your mission is and all the great works that you're doing. It's just something that I think that we want to consider because we know what the strategic goal is. We have to build up our clinic volume, and there's a large number of people in the county that don't know all the good things that are happening at our hospital. And you can only do so much in the weekly newspaper, and I say keep doing what we're doing with the newspaper. The question is, what can we do more? We have great providers, which is all you can do on the inside. The question is, how do we increase our message outside? And I want the board to know, Ellsworth and especially Mitchell County are very aggressive in their outreach and marketing and advertising. They're networking and creating clinic networks. Ellsworth operates a clinic in Lucas. Salina Regional is now operating the clinic in Ottawa. And right now, when people are on the websites in Lincoln County, they're seeing pop-up digital ads from Mitchell County Hospital System saying choose MCS, and they're doing slideshows of all their outpatient and inpatient services with audio narration. And if we did a quarterly newsletter, the postage is only about $250 a month for upwards of 1,500 pieces, and every single household in the county and every single business and every P.O. box would essentially have a health and wellness in-house newsprint piece from the hospital where we could assemble all those wonderful, happy stories and educate people about all the different services that the clinic and the hospital offers, remind them about routine and preventative health services that they should consider having right here in the local market so they don't have to drive to Salina. I think that it would not take that many new patients to make a $6,000 a year investment in a quarterly newsletter pay for itself with multiple times return on the investment. I mean, how do you guys think about the idea of a quarterly newsletter?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea, but I think it's redundant. Because if you all were to feed me the information that you have going on your projects, like I used to get last year, the year before that, and I'd had photos and news stories about the food drive and about this and about that, the newspaper does its job. So that I don't see any reason why you want to spend your resources and your time doing the same thing. If Alan feeds me information about the foundation, I write a damn article. That's my job. So if you want to send out a newsletter to your mailing list, more power to you. But I think that if you want to go countywide or through our newspaper, even though it would be a lack of revenue for us, I think it's a redundant effort.
If we were doing the same amount of advertising in the newspaper, would we not be reaching a lot of households that don't currently subscribe to the Sentinel? Because my main concern is I think we do very well with readers of the Sentinel, but I'm not sure the hundreds of households that may not subscribe to the Sentinel get to see all those great features that do regularly run
Like
in
I
the
said, it's
newspaper.
your choice, it's your decision, it just seems redundant to me.
Sure.
Well, and I'll add to that picture that I have, we have contracted for, long before I showed up, with a web page platform and subject matter professionals, and we were paying for it anyway. So now I'm starting to work with that person, and a new website will go up here this week. I was supposed to last week, but and then also they have connected me with an independent consultant who is helping me do Facebook and Instagram. And to me, those things are not redundant. That's a younger market and some of that kind of thing. But I'm just saying I am doing more. It's just that we haven't gotten it all rolling.
Yeah, well, you should have an online presence. But another thing I'm going to say, and I don't mean to step on toes or anything, but a press release every week is a little extreme. And I've been allowing it because of COVID-19, but press releases are 99% sunshine and butterflies. It's not news. Unless there's an event or a change, something that's newsworthy. So I don't mind doing those during COVID. I think it's been important. But we can't do that every week indefinitely. It ends up being free advertising, to be honest with you, on a business level. And so if you've got a message to get out that's not related to a specific action or activity or something like that, let me know what it is. I'll write it up. But I don't typically accept press releases on a weekly basis from any other business, nonprofit or not. So just so you know.
Okay. Makes sense.
Well, and I didn't want David to plan on being able to do that routinely week after week after week,
Okay.
unless you knew what my position was as news editor. I'm responsible for all the content in that newspaper. So it's real important that we maintain a neutrality when it comes to anything.
But that's good information. So if we do have new equipment or new lab procedures, or we have a new provider, a renewal of a sleep specialist that's quite skilled, if we have, I've been hearing incredible things about Lincoln County Hospital. I had someone call me last week. They had a family member at the hospital, and they were just over the moon happy with everybody in the hospital. In fact, they even said that they were thinking about purchasing an ad in the Sentinel just to thank everybody at the hospital. I don't know if
And they
put.
did.
Okay, so they did place the ad. Terrific.
Thank you.
So, I think that these stories actually happen every day, and for the very reason you said, there isn't enough space to print all the great success stories that come out of our hospital. So one of the advantages of us having a quarterly newsletter is it wouldn't just be to let people know what our hours are, our services offered, but there's not a week that goes by that there isn't a press release in the terms of people who will voluntarily waive their privacy and say, I want my story told. I want people to know what you did for my mom, my dad, my child. And I just think that by simply tapping this ready source of material, that the really important stuff can go in the newspaper, and then the other stuff that we have to tell could go in that quarterly newsletter.
I have written stories like that before, David, when people have contacted me and said, this is what happened to me, and I want you to know, I want to tell a story. And I have printed stories like that, and I don't mind doing that.
Excellent. That's great.
But I'm not going to do it over and over and over and over again, because, I'm going to say at least 80% of the time, if you make somebody well that comes in through emergency thinking they're dying, they're going to say, oh, you guys did a great job. Because they're still breathing.
Yes.
So,
I want to make a quick comment.
Sure.
I think the quarterly newspaper paper is old technology. I'd rather spend our money going towards something online website.
Well, this would be it's called an e-newsletter. So whether or not you print it and mail it for people who are, for example, this would be larger print size than the newspaper. A significant proportion of our population in Lincoln County is print disabled. It doesn't mean that they can't read. It's that they have conditions like macular degeneration or just normal decline in their vision. And reading the traditional newspaper or even on a computer screen can pose a challenge. So one advantage of doing a print edition, if we chose to do it, like I said, the postage alone is only a few hundred per quarter, is we print a large print edition for those people who may not be able to get the information elsewhere. And I agree with you, Trustee Serene. Digital advertising, a website, and taking that quarterly news piece and making it a subscribable e-newsletter would be very, very good to do. And you're right, my generation certainly gets our newsletters via email and Facebook messaging, but there's still a significant population in our demographic especially that is not taking their news electronically, who might benefit from getting that piece every, if not quarterly, maybe twice a year in their mailbox.
Okay, hold on. We've jumped from the administrator's report to budget to new business.
Well, this is a budgeting decision. That's why I brought it up.
I have one other comment.
The line item is taking up a lot of time.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a question for Tanya on this is dealing with the capital budget for next year, or year one. And you have a figure of $38,250. Is that the same figure that you quoted me?
It is.
Okay. If the board would approve that, make a motion to submit that to the foundation would purchase that piece of equipment. And I'll take it to the foundation board here as soon as I get a copy of the piece of equipment.
So what do you need, a motion?
You made the motion.
I just need approval.
Did you not make that as a motion?
Well, I don't want to do that.
Because he's president of the foundation.
Would you tell us again, what would we be approving to purchase? Or to
This piece of equipment right here.
Which page? I'm sorry.
Well, it's right the first thing under capital budget.
We didn't review that page.
No, we didn't.
That hematology equipment.
Oh, sure. Now I see it. All right, I'll make a motion. That's $38,250. Wow. Okay. I make a motion that the Board of Trustees accept the
It hasn't been approved. You just need to make a proposal. The board needs to make a proposal to the foundation.
Oh, I move that the Lincoln County Hospital Board of Trustees submit a proposal to the Lincoln County Hospital Foundation Board to fund hematology equipment with the cost of $38,250. So, is that what you need?
Yep. I'm good.
I second it.
He seconded it. We have a motion that has been seconded. Any discussion on it?
Sounds
No
good.
discussion, so we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
I abstain.
There is no opposition to the motion, so it's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Alden.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Move forward.
Have we finished with our discussion on the budget?
You guys have any other questions on it? Otherwise, would you guys approve the budget? Would you make a motion to approve the budget?
Any from a member of the board? Motion is made to approve the budget as presented. And seconded. Discussion?
I would like us, before we approve the budget today, to have at least one special board meeting that we can dedicate to further discussion of the budget. The budget is not simply a financial statement, it's the actual plan for the operation of the hospital in terms of financials. It's an opportunity and a duty of the Board of Trustees to spend time in the budget so that we can gain a much deeper understanding of how the hospital runs. And I think it would be fitting, since other public bodies in our county, especially those few that have a $7 million enterprise budget, that we have at least one special meeting to discuss the budget further and delve a little bit deeper into it and get some more information about what these aggregated totals mean, and then we could certainly approve it. I just think we should have at least one more meeting before we do it.
If I could add to this, it's sort of, well, it is a separate matter, but I will be recommending a change in the accounting firm that will be doing our cost reports and our audit this year. And I actually wanted to have a special meeting to go through that as well, because we're not quite ready to present. We have gotten proposals from 3 new accounting firms and that all have a lot of experience in rural critical access hospital financials and audits and cost reports. And it is my practice, you have been with whoever you're with in Topeka for way too long, and my practice is to change that up about every 3 to 5 years so everybody stays on their toes. There's different business relationships they have with CMS. There's some accountants learn something. It just keeps everybody on their toes. And even from what I've seen, the Topeka firm just thinks that they don't have to do much of anything. And actually, we've been receiving, particularly on COVID funding, we've been receiving educational materials, opportunities even for free webinars and such. And I don't recall the Topeka firm ever sent us much of anything, did they? Am I wrong about that?
Some, but not to the extent.
Not like what we're seeing from these other firms. And I don't know the Topeka firm. I do know the other 3 firms that we have proposals from are all specialists in rural healthcare. So, yes.
Have you asked when we know Nelson Johnson for a proposal?
Say again.
Have you asked when we know Nelson Johnson for a proposal?
You know, I have not, but I'm not interested in working with them again.
No. I have found them ever since we hired them to be a very reputable firm. If you want to see something bad, you should have seen what we had before.
Well, that's fine, but this is just my practice as the administrator, and I would appreciate your support on that. You've had them for over 10 years, 15 years. You just got to change that up. And here's the other thing, and you know, they really, it's questionable, but you know, when I got to know this board a little bit, it seemed as if you had not been totally apprised of your real cash situation. And your audit firm should have been telling you, bringing that out more. Now, they weren't totally silent on it, but they did not educate you either, because I found you not understanding what was happening here. And so right there, that's a pretty big deal to me, Ellen. Sorry. And I think they just get complacent.
How soon will you be prepared to discuss this in depth with the board then?
In a couple of weeks, 10 to 14 days, please.
But that's what you said. You're looking into it now, and that you'll bring your recommendation to the board.
We have all of the proposals,
Perfect.
and we know what we want to recommend. We just want to analyze everything and make sure we can answer detailed questions.
Perfect. Could we, since we're still discussing whether or not to approve the budget, could we consider having a special meeting and doing a twofer where we
2
make
weeks
this?
out, is that going to be giving us enough cushion time if we wait for 2 weeks to discuss the budget further?
Yeah, absolutely, because we could approve the budget on the morning of June 1st and still meet our statutory deadline to bring a piece of paper to the courthouse. But I mean, if we have a special meeting in, let's say, 2 weeks, that gives us a special meeting circa, the middle of May. This is a great place to meet. And then we would still have our regular board meeting, which would be May 26th. And then there's almost a full week before we have to run that sheet of paper or 2 or 3 to
Is
the
May
courthouse.
26th okay for a special meeting with you?
Well, that's our regular meeting.
That's a regular meeting.
That's the regular. So we have a regular meeting in 4 weeks. I'm proposing we just have one. And this gives us.
I thought that was your 2 weeks.
No. That's the idea. The special meeting is that wiggle room. We should be able to wrap this up in 2 weeks, and then on May 26th, we're not cramming. We're not cramming for our exam with the commission.
I don't know why. We're not going to change this very much, are you?
The budget?
Yeah.
I don't see that we will,
No.
and I don't think,
I
honestly,
say go
that I
ahead and
have a
vote
lot
on
of
it.
time to spend.
We got a motion on the floor. Let's vote on it.
Yep, we still have open.
There's also a 3% across the board payroll increase in the hospital, and I'm not saying I'm against it, but I just think that as a board, we should also have to discuss that as well. For example, to know what 3% represents as far as the amount, and I'd like to know, for example, for the benefit of the employees, is when was the last time they've received a raise and things like
Last year.
So they did receive. Do you know how much they received last year?
It was in that 3% neighborhood.
Yeah, I would just prefer to have a special meeting to do this. I mean, that will allow me, because I came here, I emailed management some questions, and they did provide some information. But I'm not prepared as a board member to approve a budget until I have a chance to review all the information. I've received a lot of information today. I would like the opportunity to consider what I heard today and perhaps ask a few more questions, and then I'll certainly be able to vote to approve the budget if we have one more meeting before we do it.
Okay. Then I still have a motion on the floor that's outstanding.
And a second. And a second, right?
Yes.
Jim.
Bob made the motion, Jim seconded it.
So can we take it back?
You may
Up
have
to you.
to resolve this, you must withdraw your
I
motion.
withdraw the motion.
Okay, the motion has been withdrawn. Now, let's discuss the date for another meeting to discuss and finalize the budget for approval. I suggest next week at the latest. Tuesday of next week,
Same time?
same time. Place to be determined,
You can say it's here, I guess.
okay, right here in the clubhouse. 1 week from today.
So that's May 5th, is that correct?
What's the date, Cliff?
Today, see, we're into a
Today's
month. Today's the 28th, and a week from today is May 5th.
May 5th?
Yes, Tuesday, May 5th. Cinco de Mayo.
Will that give you enough time to bring the recommendation for a new hospital auditor?
What do you think, Tanya?
I could probably, I think for the recommendation, I could probably do that.
What do you think?
I'm not sure what additional information, what kind of time I'm going to have in a week to provide a lot of additional information for a budget.
We were also potentially, potentially considering having the recommended audit firm come in meet with you. I don't know if they're gonna be willing to do that. We haven't told the winner or the person we're recommending, and then that doesn't get you to see the other three, so it's a little, it's pushing my
We could do
agenda.
that following week.
Oh, sure.
Or at the regular meeting, yeah.
This is liable to get disbobulated and take a lot of time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can do that on the 5th. I think I have a good understanding of the issues and my opinion. I mean, I'm really driving that bus because I'm requiring a change. And I've worked or know people at all three firms, too, that have done proposals.
Can we hear names?
Yes, there's Roger Thompson at Simon Johnson in Omaha. He's their top health partner at Simon Johnson in their health division. The other person is Kurt Morrell, Moural, and he is in western Nebraska, and he's a smaller firm. Simon is pretty big, and Kurt has helped me out before, but he doesn't have as many resources as the other two firms. And then, and I forget, he's near Hastings, but it's not Hastings. It's another town in western Nebraska. And then the other firm is BKD, and we are working with the people out of their, is it St. Louis or Kansas City? Kansas City office, I believe. And that's the biggest firm. Sime is a regional accounting firm out of Omaha. Kurt Morrell is kind of a smaller firm out in western Nebraska. And BKD is a national level firm that has a health division. And the person there that I have been working with is Chad Tisdale.
What's the cost difference from what we have currently?
Actually, I guess I don't know currently. I didn't hear frankly. Do you know the cost difference?
I believe that the two out of Nebraska were slightly cheaper.
He's talking about what we've paid in the past.
Compared to what they
Yeah, compared
Right.
to what it would have cost us with Win-Win now.
Right.
Oh, so they've been cheaper than your other ones?
Slightly.
Okay. Oh yeah,
Just
yeah,
slightly.
that's right.
And BKD was quite a bit more expensive.
Tanya,
Yes.
wasn't BKD the one we had before we hired?
Now we had Grant Thornton. We've never had BKD.
All three of these firms have pretty specialized health divisions. Kurt, of course, is very small. He maybe has a half dozen people. Simon Johnson, they have a lot of people, and they do consulting as well. And then BKD is even bigger. Their health division is just huge, and Simon Johnson only has, I believe, their Omaha office, whereas BKD is across the country with their health division.
Now, this is an accounting firm.
Yes.
Does that include auditors? Do they operate as auditors for us also?
Yes, they are. They prepare our cost report for Medicare, Medicaid, and they also do an audit.
And they give you accounting advice too?
Yes.
Okay. Can you give us a ballpark figure? What is it, 50,000, 30,000?
I want to say BKD was in the neighborhood of 45,000. I think Win-Win was in the neighborhood of 33,000.
30, okay.
Seam Johnson, I want to say, was 30. And then, what was the other one? In Nebraska, it was less than that.
Well, that's fine.
It was
I
the
just wanted,
cheapest.
yeah, I just wanted that ballpark
The
figure.
one that was low had all kinds of, if we do that, he had a lot more sliding around on maybe charging you more
Okay.
on that.
I just was curious about, so really, the expense may not be that much different than last year.
Correct. That's
Okay.
what it appears.
Okay. Hopefully, even maybe if you pick that one higher one or
That's
They're
not
the
the
ones
one I'm
that are-
recommending.
Yeah.
whatever. Okay.
I'll be recommending Simon Johnson.
Okay, have you finished with your administrator's report? We still have
Yes.
more.
Are we tired of me by now? Yes. Yes.
Okay, time for old business. Is there any old business to bring to the board?
I'm so sorry. Let me talk to you about the mid-level restructuring because there's rumors all over town on that, and just while everybody's here, we have executed or exercised the 90-day notice with all of our mid-level providers other than Andrea Ronaldo, who is a manager. And so these people are working with us on our current schedule and current costs through June 15th or so, the middle of June. We are recruiting. We've probably had 10 or 12 applications for the full-time positions, and we are interviewing 7. 2 of those are internal applicants. You might as well know it's Abby and Lindsay Root, and then 5 external candidates. And on the weekend position, we did have an internal candidate. Sarah Biggs is interviewing for that too. And we haven't even figured out who we're going to interview yet because I think we have upwards of 20 applications for the weekend role. So I'm very pleased with what we're seeing and feel real confident that we will have a good structure in place by the middle or late June. So that is the end of the report because I know people talk about
Are we going to limit the total number of mid-levels from what we have now into after June 15th?
Yes. Maybe you missed that. Yeah. Yes.
Well, so they'll be working, you'll have less providers, but they'll be working more hours. Is that the plan?
It depends upon, they may be working a few more hours, but I don't know that it's significant. Go ahead.
Was that mid-level, is that emergency room, or is that all everywhere in the hospital? Or
What had happened, Randy, is we had mid-levels in the ER separately from mid-levels in the clinic, and that's what we can't afford.
Yeah.
There wasn't enough patient volume in either place to have different sets. So we're basically going back to what you had before, which is the mid-levels are based in a clinic, they see clinic patients, but they go to the ER when there's an ER case,
Okay.
so they're covering that. And then you have to cover the after-clinic hours, so they're on duty then too.
Okay.
So, and overall, we're reducing FTEs by about 1.5.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So if they're based in the clinic, will they have patient load?
It's not really operated that way. The physicians will be the primary care providers, and the mid-levels, because they'll be rotating through, they're just as if they can build a patient load if patients want to go to them all the time. There's no prohibition to it at all, but that's not really what the job is set up for. And actually, that was some of the problem with the really high pay we had with mid-levels, is it was taking patients away from the physicians and paying somebody a lot more than we should have been paying them, frankly. So, so the base is to grow our physician practice, and the mid-levels are there to assist. They will be assisting in the ER, in inpatient, rounding, and admissions and discharges, as well as in the clinic. They will be able to build their clinic, their patient base, if they want to, and if patients want to see them, sure. I guess the shorter answer to that is yes. But it's not their top priority. All right?
Okay.
What's Andrea's position going to do besides being manager of the ER?
She is going to be working as much as a clinician as she is now. So she will be in the clinic 1 day a week, and in that clinic day, she will be covering the ER and the inpatient unit as well, and that is about what she's doing now, except she's already, double covering for other people who didn't want to fill in spots. So she'll be working the same clinical she is now. Is that not answering your question?
Well, then what's her position then with the overseeing the mid-levels?
She'll be the supervisor, yeah.
Well, I guess I'm not seeing it just yet, but...
Well, everybody needs a boss. And what I saw there is something that was, I'm going to be real frank, completely out of control, because nobody was the boss. So Andrea will be the line manager doing performance evals and that kind of a thing in partnership with the chief medical officer. We also need to work on our protocols, policies, and procedures. There isn't a lot going on over there for that. And so she will be working with Jackie Pounds and Dr. Chima to build clinical policies across the whole institution. She also is the most experienced mid-level provider we have across all of the areas that we have in this organization with clinic, inpatient, and ER.
Who's this again?
Andrea Ronaldo.
Okay.
I think she's worked here 5 years too or something, hasn't she?
Yeah, 106.
She also has been absolutely instrumental in helping me deal with what I walked in onto here. And I will tell you, no one else has. If you need me to get even more direct, I'm happy to do that, Alan.
We could go into an executive session if you wanted, because I mean you've been here a
No,
long
we can
time.
do it one-on-one.
Or one-on-one, okay.
Yeah, it's not even appropriate for executive session.
Okay,
Sorry.
just a suggestion.
Let's move on. Let's move on.
Old business. Second time now, old business. Yeah.
Yes. That was mentioned probably 3 or 4 or 5 months ago already about getting our retirement program into a different sync so they don't have to pay for the expensive doctors and that for their retirement plan. Something was brought up that we hit the $70,000 mark. We quit funding the program for them. How does everybody feel? And give me some input so I know where I can go.
It was a few months ago that we had discussed what we would be spending on those items. I don't have that data in front of me, but it was not as costly as what we had originally thought because of what Medicare reimburses us and what we would have to be paying for the FICA insurance portion of that.
But isn't it a true fact that when the Chimas here are here for a year, they are eligible for the plan?
That is correct.
That's $50,000 a year. It's not too hard to figure. We've got a 9% plan now, right? Let's just make it 10% so it's easy figuring. Got $300 and some odd thousand from Dr. Chima, $200 and some odd $1,000 from Mrs. Chima, times 10. That's $50,000 a year that we're going to have to pay them for their retirement fund.
And then Medicare picks
Now.
up half of that.
Now, with that in mind, something was brought up about a $70,000 limit.
The max.
I remember the number. And the problem is we haven't done a darn thing with it. We're not pro or against it. And if we keep backing this off, we're going to owe that $50,000. I don't care how, whether it's from Medicare, Medicaid, or whatever the thing is, it's beside the point. It's still $50,000 out of our budget. Now, are we willing to take the gamble and keep this $70,000 in because that would take care of all our nurses and it would not take care of our mid-levels because they make more money in that.
I'll check my accounts.
Am I right?
I'm not sure.
Our mid-levels
I
probably
don't
$40,000
remember.
a year.
I remember that the Chimas would be affected by the $70,000 maximum. I don't remember the mid-levels.
But
And they would too.
They would be.
the fact is, if we keep putting it back, we're going to owe this money. There's no other option to it. We owe the money. Are we willing to take the bull by the horns and grab this as a possibility of changing things? Since we're restructuring anyhow, I think this would be a good time to even get into that.
So you're telling me
Yeah?
they're making $500,000 a year and we pay into their retirement?
Yes, we do.
That is correct.
That's right.
Yes, we do.
after 1 year of employment.
Yeah, when the 1 year anniversary comes, that's when it starts. Now, that's why I'm telling you, we got to get on ball here before they get to that 1 year anniversary and get this decided.
Well, they're there now, aren't they?
I don't want to say, didn't we?
They
do
are.
it?
They've been here a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just rented my apartment for another year. They paid it a year in advance.
Okay.
Yes. And then drive over the sidewalk and load their groceries.
You may need to abstain from any vote regarding this thing.
Say it
You
again.
might want to abstain from any vote that we would make that might affect, or at least think about that.
I have to apologize. I have not focused on this at all. So I remember we had the discussion and we decided to leave the retirement pretty much alone, but I don't remember specifically on this maximum piece. Obviously, we didn't make a motion or we would have followed through, right?
I don't think the motion was ever
Yeah.
made motion that I know of.
Yeah.
I've got a
you did-
question.
oh,
Out of that 9%, do they pay any of that?
Trying to think how that works. They have to put in, I want to say it's 4.5%. Don't quote me on that because I don't have the figure here in front of me.
How many?
I think they have to put in 4.5%. They don't put in anything on that 9%. That would be the employer's portion.
I know when I was looking for KDOT, it was an understanding that you weren't eligible for retirement if you didn't put in a plan. Okay. That plan was 6%. They paid, you paid 6%. That made it a 12% thing, and that was probably as fair as we're going to ever get with it. If they don't pay very much of this 9%, I think we need to do some changing there too.
Before this goes any
Either bring it down,
Before this goes any farther, you're naming names and salaries. I think we better have executive session.
right. We can. But the problem, I just wanted to know how much, what percentage, well, if the one was paying it, they're all paying that. So it wouldn't be all just one salary, right? It's a bunch of salaries. Anyhow, I was just wanting to know if they paid any, what percentage actually, you said 3.5%,
I think it's 4.5.
but that makes a total of 9 then?
No, that's an addition.
How
So
much?
that would be an addition. So the employee puts in 4.5, I think, thereabouts, and the the employer puts in 9%.
So you basically double what their contribution is, approximately. right?
Approximately, it's not exactly double.
It should be matching, kind of.
You have to matching money, but you put in double match, basically,
Yeah.
approximately, we don't know.
Right.
Now, that's another 401k then, retirement?
It's not a 401k, no.
Okay.
That's just an old plan that Mr. Stein says it's not offered no more.
Right.
It's obsolete.
And I don't remember when we discussed it, and we decided to leave it alone.
I kind of remember why we decided to leave it alone. You had come to the board with some facts and figures.
Right.
And I believe we did look at the employees as a whole, and we also included our high compensated employees. And there were two factors that you sparked my memory. One was that I can't remember if it's Medicare or Medicaid, but we're actually getting reimbursed for a significant portion of that 9%. So the actual cost was substantially less than even the cost for 2 employees if we left the policy in place.
Right.
The second consideration that I remember was that, and it's similar to a 401k, I've been through it, is when you adopt a new plan, it's legal. It's thick contracts, and there's a substantial cost it may only be a one-time fee, but that was a substantial cost. And I think the reason we tabled it is as soon as we realized, and perhaps you could bring these numbers back again, and I'm glad you brought this up because it's important that we know what this is. But I think what we realized is that the effective savings for the hospital was going to be so small when we kicked in that reimbursement that we qualify as a critical access hospital, that the competitive advantage that it was giving us over, let's say, Ellsworth, I can't remember if they're 6% or 6.5, but we're only providing a small increase over and above, let's say, Ellsworth. I don't know whether they cap it. I don't think they do. In fact, because I have the spreadsheet from them that they shared with me. I can look at that. But I do believe we can look at it again, but I think we've started saying, oh man, we could save it's a substantial amount of money we won't have to pay. But when we realized who would end up paying for it, and it wasn't us, that we decided to table it. But it's worth double checking.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. Yeah. So should we bring that back to the special meeting in a week? Because we did that. Just
we'll leave it alone for now.
Say again. Say again.
We'll leave it alone for now.
Okay.
I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Good explanation, thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm just glad you're because when you first brought it up, I was saying, hey, wait a second too, and then I remembered that it was the same thing that got our attention the first time until we looked at those details, what the CFO is so good at doing, and we realized it wasn't as costly as we thought it would be.
It was that, the FICA savings, the additional costs that we would be involved with the attorneys and...
Okay.
I think
something was just grinding back here in the
and I'm with you, Jim, on that. But didn't Grover take a good look at that with you? Rod Grover?
He might have been on the board.
I don't know. He was still on the board, I think.
Yeah, I want to say he was pretty involved in that piece, and he was all after it, and he kind of I remember him kind of backing off.
Yeah, I remember he was still on the board, I think.
So...
Okay.
But I couldn't have explained it to you like David did, so.
Any other old business?
Mr. Chairman, yesterday I had the opportunity to be in Sylvan Grove and I put up a yard sign for Congressman Marshall, who's running for the state senate. If the board don't approve of that, I'll go take that sign down. But I also went down to City Hall to make sure I was not infringing upon KDOT's property, and I put it on the west side of the sidewalk, and I ran into Mr. Larry Meitler, and I asked him if he was getting ready to mow the lawn. He said he was going to mow it today. My question to the board is, are we still going to keep mowing the lawn up there as much as we had in the past? If he has, nobody has notified him.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Could you think you?
The clinic.
Oh, Sylvan Grove.
There's a clinic over there.
Do we own
Well,
that
we
building?
can't totally garbage it.
Huh?
Do we own that building?
We do.
County does.
Hospital does. Hospital does.
Hospital owns that building?
Hospital.
I thought the county owned it.
No.
No, that's a difference.
Hospital.
Hospital, we have that.
Hospital owns it, okay.
You don't have to mow it.
Randy, do you know what the state law is? Can the commission, for example, permit or place a political advertisement in front of the courthouse?
Well, I don't know, but I don't think so, because somebody could complain that's public property, right?
That's the
It looks like the courthouse
COVID, basically.
or
And
condones that one
costs down
candidate. Probably not good, because I don't know what the law is, though. You know that doesn't probably mean here, does it?
The only thing I can think of is if you're permitting one person to place a sign on hospital property, we probably at minimum need to have a non-discriminatory policy that then opens the door for anybody else that wants to stick a
Sure.
sign there. So,
I don't, my personal opinion is I don't think, like say in the courthouse here, nobody should put an ad for a candidate because it looks like the county's promoting that person.
Right.
And the county really isn't, so.
Right.
I'll remove it.
I'm glad you brought it up, thanks.
I personally, and also if you did allow it, then you better let everybody under, then you might have 10 signs out there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the question was, are you gonna mow it or not? You're gonna have to mow
Well,
it.
that's the second part.
Yeah, we got to mow it. I don't know if the hospital, you guys run that one, right, Alan?
We
County
do.
does, okay.
But I think we ought to maybe not mow as much as we had in the past because it was shorter than this grass here, so.
Okay.
Is it mowed by a building and grounds person who works for the hospital, or is it
No.
contracted
No, it
out?
must be-
Did you have a contract with Mr. Myler probably to mow it, Alan?
I don't know the contract. We-
Well, we contract like the county does for
Is it verbal?
We
cemeteries.
just pay him to mow it, of course.
Okay?
So we'll try to reduce that cost too a little bit.
We done with old business? Let's approve the accounts payable.
What are they? Oh, I see it, yeah. Copy that.
Chairman, are we able to just ask questions? Is that what we're doing now?
Let's get a motion and then we'll bring it in for discussion.
I move that we approve accounts payable for Lincoln County Hospital in the amount of $470,000, $215.24.
Second on the motion. Motion is made and seconded to pay the bill. Discussion?
I have one question. I noticed that I saw a law firm that I didn't recognize. Have we changed law firms, or is this for a special project?
Is it, where do you see it?
The Baird Home Attorneys at Law?
Oh, yeah. Baird Home, I'm using Baird for the HR work that we're doing in restructuring.
Excellent. Thank you.
I will see you in the middle of it.
Pardon? Yes, that's what the most I've done.
Any further discussion?
One other question,
On that?
and I'll make it quick. You're buying from US Foods, $6,000 a month. How much money do we take in from employees, from Meals on Wheels, from...
Off the top of my head, I couldn't give you a figure, but it's not a lot. A lot of it goes to feed the inpatients and swing bed patients that we have. We do take in some money from the jail, but I don't have a dollar figure that I can, off the top of my head, give you.
The only thing I really do know in this room is something about food. Not very much about that. I'd love to see some of your invoices.
From US Foods to see what they're billing us?
Yeah.
I would love that.
Be glad to check prices.
Very good.
And I'll guarantee you the company you're using, you're getting your bill.
Are they through our regular GPO, or is that
They
different
are.
thing? Yeah, so this is the big GPO question. It's kind of like the health benefits question. I haven't quite got there yet. GPO is the Group Purchasing Organization, and we are in, I think, what is it called?
Right, Sunflower Health.
Sunflower?
Yeah,
Sunflower
okay.
Health.
And so that's what we use, because we're so little, we use that bigger group to get better prices on things. But I know the food business, I've been taught very well by someone who ran food services at, in a teaching hospital, and I would love to have you take a look at it. Also, the menu thing that they're doing and the quality of stuff that we're getting is kind of in my book, but I haven't, there's only so many boats I can rock at once. So, but if you can make a more honest on the price, I'll go take it.
I'd be glad to look at it.
Sounds good.
And I'll make my comment on the county approximately pays $1,500 to $2,000 a month for the sheriffs, for the inmates at the jail. Approximately, it varies. So that we pay the hospital, I think, and you provide meals for the inmates, right?
Correct.
So it's approximately $1,500 to $2,000. That gets paid back here.
So you got Meals on Wheels.
Correct.
How many Meals on Wheels do you send out,
Not a lot.
5,
Any
10?
given day, maybe 4 or 5.
Oh, is
Any
that
given
all?
day, 4 or 5 maybe. It's not a lot.
All right. The employees eat.
Employees
eat.
At a reduced price, as they should.
Yes,
Okay.
Is the senior center still putting out meals?
they are.
Okay.
Yeah, about 100 a day, I think.
Yep.
Is that up because of COVID?
Yeah, and they're delivering to.
They deliver them all over.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah, there's a lot of it.
So there's 2 services in the community providing Meals on Wheels.
The one's the Council on Aging.
Yep.
Yes.
The one here is supposed
The
to
one
be for
we-
special dietary needs.
Correct. You have to have a doctor's note. in
Oh,
order
to get ours?
to
Oh,
get
so ours
ours.
is
Yeah,
prescribed.
And that's why we don't have very many.
And you
first
guys,
of all.
I think maybe have special diets ordered by the doctor, right?
Correct.
And because of that, that's why they're specific.
That's why they go in the hospital, yeah.
And
Right.
the
That's why
senior-
they're different. I asked that before
Yeah.
too, when we were at the commissioner's meeting. I go, how come we got 2 meals on
Well,
wheels
and
meals?
it-
And they said that this is
At the
hospital.
senior center, you can still do lower sodium and that sort of thing, but not as specific as
Yeah.
like the hospital.
Some of these have special doctor's orders for a special diet.
And then the Senior Citizen Center does not deliver on weekends or on
Right.
holidays,
Right.
where the hospital does every day of the week.
And who delivers your meals?
Volunteers.
Yeah. You could deliver if you wanted to.
Do I need to take it down again so you can see the smile?
He's too busy cooking down there.
I left the house at 4:30 this morning.
Yeah.
I have two payables questions, but I have a question. I know that the Lincoln Senior Center was through Flint Hills Area Aging
Council on Aging, yeah.
Council on Aging. That Meals and Wheels program is fully funded through federal, state grants and a healthy contribution that the county commission provides through the Sylvan Senior Center. It's many tens of thousands of dollars a year that are paying for all their food, and they, in some cases, they may provide some reimbursements for people who drive, mileage. And I'm curious.
Well, and they do commodities and disaster distribution of food and that sort of thing too.
I'm curious. Is our Meals and Wheel program being provided as part of our charitable outreach, or are we qualifying for any funding? So it's not coming out of our own.
We
necessarily-
charge for each meal,
Okay.
so there's no special funding. We just charge for it.
And then I had 2 quick other questions. I see Authoritex on the payables for 340B auditor. Is this the annual independent audit that we're now doing to double check all of our compliance with the 340B program?
Yeah, actually that happens more often than just annually. He does a thorough audit quarterly, and then he also reviews everything monthly, so.
Is the $7,843 payment, is that a quarterly, annual, monthly? How much?
It would not be annual. It'd be the monthly, but I don't know if that's happened to fall for the quarterly or just monthly. I don't recall.
And are you happy with them? Are they?
I am.
And they're in place so that if we do receive another federal audit, we've got sort of an in-house stamp of approval, so we won't. It's designed to make sure that we're compliant with the federal program.
That's what it's designed to do.
Excellent.
Well, I don't want to, I know Tanya was part of, Steve set this up and all that kind of thing. I will tell you I am not comfortable, and I will be looking at it. number one. And number two, I was going to give you a little pharmacy lesson. I had to lock down your pharmacy the last several weeks. And there was probably anybody in town who could have gotten in there. And I do hear stories of inappropriate access into our pharmacy. So that's another little board lesson of things you got to check once in a while. And 340B is probably one of the most complicated financial programs that they put together in the complicated healthcare world, and I will be looking at that. Because, I don't even know if this group is aware of what happened there. That we were, I don't know, I don't want to besmirch things that Tanya may have been involved with, but I'm not comfortable with what I'm seeing yet. I will be looking further. It may be fine, but I'm going to be examining that much more closely.
The second question I had was the, oh goodness, it was the, hang on a second here, sorry, should have highlighted it. First Dakota Indemnity Company, is that the new director and officer insurance that you were signing up for? On 4/14?
I think that's the work comp
Oh, okay.
portion.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is that any of your questions?
Yes, very much so.
Take a vote on it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. No opposition, the matter passes. May board meeting, May 26th. Special meeting a week from today. Same time, same station. To discuss budget finals and vote. And now, if there's no other business to conduct, we'll ask for an adjournment. Motion is made. Seconded. All in favor, say get up and go.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I also want to thank both Tanya Seitz and Dean Doshi for jumping on 7 figures worth of grants and financing for the hospital in the middle of the pandemic. There are hospitals that didn't get in on that first in line, and they're out in the cold, and just what they've done in the last month has completely restored, we'll see what's forgiven and not, but restored our working capital cushion for the hospital, which has been a major concern that we have. So thank you very much, both
Well,
of you.
and the greatest credit goes to Tanya.
Okay, thank you, CFS, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for doing it timely. Because just like David said, the guys now, even if they're in line, they may be waiting 2-3 months to get it.
Well, I appreciate the commission's help
Oh,
on that.
you bet, you bet.
Before it's signed and
Yeah, well, that's fine, no problem. Anytime you guys got any issues,